So again, this is Deal or No Deal, negotiating job offers. Again, my name is Marvin Lopez, and many of you know me, but for those of you who don't know me, I'm Director of Student Programs and Engineering Student Services. My pronouns are he, him, his. And just a quick bit about me, I'm from LA, so I grew up in the LA area, San Gabriel area, so that's a picture right there on the screen. I went to UC in the LA area, and I'm also an engineer, so I have a computer science background. So I'm still a techie and I'm still a geek at heart, but ultimately I love people and I love developing and coaching, in particular students and university talent, which is what brought me here. But I do speak techie and I do love technology still to this day. I'm also a product of MESA. For those of you that know what MESA is, the program, the Math Engineering Science Achievement Program. It's actually run out of the UC Office of the President. So I'm a member of that my whole life. And I'm also a lifetime member of the Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers, which is partly why I do what I do. My career has mostly been in industry up until 5 years ago, since I came to campus. First as an engineer, actually coding way back when. And over time, I realized that I had a passion for people and developing talent and such. And so I moved over to HR to run university programs. So I ran the programs to hire co-ops, interns, and new grads around the world with the companies you see there on the screen. And of course, I've hired a number of students in my time. And so I've been on the other side quite a bit, on the offer side, making offers and negotiating and having the conversations with candidates. So I've done a little bit of this so I can know, so I bring that experience to you. And now, of course, I'm at ESS as Director of Programs, where I run, and I have an amazing team, including Tracy, and I see Nicole is also on the call, who manage to run a number of programs for all of you on academic support. We run what's now the Virtual Center for Access to Engineering Excellence for tutoring and other services. The leadership program, I see some of you have been on that program. Our etiquette dinner, workshops like this, and support for all our student organizations and other leadership development programs, and other programs that we're bringing online, virtual or not. So what we do for all of you to ensure your success is growing, and I'm delighted at the opportunity to do it. So, all right, so that's a little bit about me. Let's get started. So we're going to talk today about why negotiate and what that looks like and what that means. The elements of job offers, all the various things that you could ask and that make up a job offer. It is not just the salary. So just, so you know that up front. The factors to consider as you consider job offers. Some negotiating do's and don'ts when it comes to job offers. I'll make a note about, or say a word about deadlines, because that's become a hot topic lately. And then accepting and declining, what that looks like, some final thoughts. Leave you with some resources in this whole world of negotiation, job offer negotiations. And I have an official section at the end for questions, but again, please add the questions to the chat box. Tracy will keep an eye on them and we'll address them as we go. So again, I don't want this to be a lecture. So, all right. And I want to make a commitment to you and offer that this workshop will be successful if you walk away more knowledgeable about evaluating job offers and more confident about negotiating job offers. So hopefully through the course of this conversation, you'll get both of those, and we'll see at the end how you feel. So here we go. So why negotiate? Why would you bother negotiate? What's the point of negotiating? Ultimately, it's to arrive at a win-win solution. So what does that mean? A win-win meaning that you have an offer for a career opportunity. So it's not a job. Don't think of it as just literally for this job, but that it's an offer that engages you as a new employee coming into an organization, that you feel welcome, included, and rewarded for what you bring, and a win for the organization hiring you, the company or whoever it may be, where they're getting the talent that they're looking for, and they're getting somebody that also is engaged and interested and passionate about what what you do and what they do. And I just saw a note that my internet is unstable. Am I freezing, Tracy? Does it sound okay?
You sound fine.
Okay.
Yeah, it was fine. It was a little, you stopped for a second, but you're good. Yeah.
Okay, so, it's the world's a remote, so who knows what we'll get, but let's carry on. So that's why we negotiate, is to win-win. So it's not simply to get more money. It is not simply to negotiate. It's to arrive at a win-win arrangement between you and the company you're talking to, or companies that you're talking to. But first off, a few notes that you should know right away. Almost everything is negotiable, so not everything, but I'll mention to a point, and be careful with whom you negotiate. And I mention that because the ultimate word on a job offer is HR, is a human resources folks, it's your recruiter. Your hiring manager, your potential boss, and other people might get all excited and make you and offer you all kinds of things that they may not be able to deliver. So ultimately, whatever they offer you has to come from HR in a letter. So be careful who you negotiate with, because they may not actually have the authority to give you what they offer, as excited as they are. And it happens all the time. But be sure that you get something that you're negotiating with the people that actually can deliver what they promise. They want you. So don't forget that they want you. The reason why they made you an offer is because they want you. So you have power over this. So don't think that you're entirely beholden to the company or whoever's making the offer to do whatever they say and accept whatever they give you. They want you, and there's a reason why they're making this offer. So leverage that. And remember that, think of it, that the recruiter is working for you to make you happy, not just you make them happy. So this is really a two-way street, but an offer means that they want you. So leverage that. Get it in writing. An offer does not exist if it's not in writing. And yes, you'll get emails. Well, emails kind of count, but you'll get voicemails, texts, all sorts of things that say you'll get all kinds of amazing things, bonuses, stock options, you name it. But until it's in writing in a PDF that you can actually sign, it does not exist. So be very careful with promises, with changes to an initial offer that doesn't come back with an updated offer in writing. If it's not in writing, it does not exist, as much as they might want you to believe so. And this is a hot topic as well, I used to have never renege, just outright never ever renege. But I added the almost because with this competition for talent and companies' interest in really securing your commitment to them, they're pushing and pushing the dates, tighter and tighter than ever. And sometimes they paint you into a corner. And, if in your heart you believe that the only thing you can do is renege, I completely understand sometimes. So I won't say never ever renege completely, because there are times when you're painted into a corner, and that does happen. And of course, in this context that we're in, if there's issues, personal issues or family issues that come up as a result of the pandemic, and you have to renege for some, for personal issues, then of course that's even more important. So I'm not so binary about this reneging anymore. So I'll just put it that way. Tracy?
Marvin, I'm going to stop you right there.
Yeah.
We have questions on what does renege mean?
Oh, sorry. Renege means, yes, I forget that. I speak HR sometimes and I forget that not everybody speaks HR. Renege means that you committed to an offer, you've accepted an offer, and then you take it back. So you no longer are accepting this offer. That's what that means. So it's going back on a commitment, basically. So good. Okay, moving on. So let's warm up. So like I said, I don't want you to just want this to be a lecture. So let's warm up and let's start on a happy note. So let's pretend that you got a call for a job offer. So a recruiter calls you with a job offer and you want to discuss. So I'm going to break you up into pairs, and one of you will be the recruiter, one of you will be the candidate, and we'll have you switch and basically have a conversation about what are you getting, what are the terms, what's the deadline, when to expect the offer in writing. So be sure you're comfortable asking for that, because you will have to ask for that. Ideally over the phone. So, often now these things happen by email, but preferably over the phone. So, so let's do that. Let's break you up, and I'll give you 2-3 minutes, let's say 3 minutes, to have the conversation, just to warm you up. So partner A, breakout rooms, and we're out of breakout rooms. Oh, because I want you to be comfortable having these conversations over the phone or on Zoom, not by email and not by text. These are the kind of conversations that are important to have in real time, either over Zoom or phone, not by text. So you can, but preferably not. So I want you to be comfortable with the idea of having these conversations with real people in real time. So let's talk first about the elements of a job offer for interns. And the things you see in bold are the things that I believe that generally are negotiable. The others are generally not. So things like a job title should include, your job title. A job offer should include your title, whatever it may be, a programmer or anything. Your salary, whether it's hourly or monthly, your start date, a duration, a location, and in these times, be mindful or be clear whether it's a remote position, or you'll be working somewhere locally by next summer. things should be going back somewhat to normal, so that there'll be even more ambiguity whether jobs are local or in person or remote. So make sure you have that clarity, who your manager will be, what division you're in, and of course the deadline for accepting or declining. That's be very mindful that it's very clear in the offer, that's included. And the contingencies, things like background checks, drug checks, all that should be included. And of course that's not negotiable. That's, if you got to do that, you got to do that. And then other things that it should include or mention at least is things like, do you have a mentor? Do you have a buddy? Are you part of an intern program that has structure with presentations and support and all that? Or are you a one-off hire separate from a program? So that, and it's a very different experience that you'll have if you're part of a program versus a one-off hire. So be very clear what this will look like. Will you have vacation? Sometimes intern programs have 1 or 2 days of vacation over the summer. Sometimes they have relocation, sometimes they have housing. So make sure you're clear about all these things. And again, the things that you see in bold are generally negotiable. The others, not so much. Certainly contingencies, drug checks, all that, that's not negotiable. So don't even bother asking about that. And the salary, the start date, we'll talk about that in a minute. A full-time offer, of course, is a little more complex and a little more thorough. So there's lots of things that are included in there. And again, some are largely negotiable and some are largely not. So a full-time offer includes things, again, the job title. Be very clear whether this is a contract position or a full-time position, or in other words, are you being hired and will your employment come through directly with the company that you're hiring with or the offer comes from, or are you a contractor with a third party for a temporary basis? And not a lot of companies are doing this nowadays, where you come in as a contractor first for, let's say, 6 months. They try you out, and if you work out, if you meet certain criteria, they see you as a fit, they convert you to an official employee of the company. So it's like a middle ground. So be very clear that's what you're getting here, or an outright employment. Salary, of course, the start date, the location, who your manager might be, your division. Again, the deadline for returning, for accepting or declining. Whether there's a probation period of 6 whatever months, 3 months, where anyone can, where they can let you go, if you don't meet certain criteria. Whether this is a rotational position, meaning that this is not your final position, you'll be rotating them on different positions and then end up in a final one after some period of time. So be clear that's the case. And again, contingencies and background checks and all of that. Then you should also include, which is also kind of negotiable, things like sign-on bonuses. They're still happening even in this context, so they've not gone away. Stock options, sometimes they're automatic with a position, sometimes they're not. You can negotiate those, so depending on the rest of the package. Relocation and moving expenses are very common with full-time position, and they're based on your home, where you're at. So it's based on basically Berkeley. So if you're here at Berkeley physically, or at least by the time you get the offer, it's based on wherever you're at, not your official home address. So I know often students want to get moving expenses when they're in Berkeley. The job's in LA and they live in LA, or at least their home is in LA, but it's based on where you're at. So the hours, whether it's this, flex time, that sort of thing, and performance review. It should be a note about when you'll be reviewed, every 6 months, or at least your initial review every year. Your first review will be on whatever period, but there should be clarity for that. And then the other things that it could include, or at least mention somewhere in the offer for a full-time position, is all these things you see here. Things like vacation, your health plan, retirement, fitness allowance, travel, training, all that kind of stuff. They don't always have them, but these are the kind of things it could include, and these are usually not negotiable. If they're included, they are what they are. So vacation is what they offer. The retirement plan is a retirement plan. ESP is employee stock purchasing plan. So it's allowing you to buy stock of a company at a lower price because you're an employee. And those terms are all fixed, so you can't negotiate that kind of thing. Travel, of course, right now it's limited or non-existent. Same with transit. So but at the same time, in today's world, make sure that you discuss things like technology for working remotely. Can you work from anywhere? All those kinds of questions that are a little different now in this context versus the normal times. So I'll just pause there for a second if there's any immediate questions.
No, we don't have anything right now. Can you
No
hear me?
questions? Okay.
Yeah, nothing right now.
Carry on. Okay, so factors to evaluate. What factors to consider as you evaluate job offers. Um, these are all the things that you should consider in addition to just money. So obviously, number one is money. And by that, I mean not just the salary, but sign-in bonuses, raises, stock options, etc. So be mindful of that the world of compensation is not just literally the salary. Your role, whether you'll be a designer, a tester, coder, whatever the role might be very clear in what that is. What project you'll be on. Tracy?
Yeah, there is a question here. What would happen if you don't have transit options, but after COVID you are required
Can't hear
to? Oh, you can't. My headphones are going as well. Sorry. The question is, what would happen if you don't have
Still
transit?
can't hear you.
You still can't hear me? No?
I can hear her.
I can see. Marvin, can you hear me? You can't hear me. Marvin? Everyone else, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, so Marvin, you can't.
Okay, let me just bring up the.
Let's see. Can you hear me now?
I can't hear you for some reason.
Okay, so that's but other people can hear me.
Marvin, can you hear the rest of us?
Got it. I can hear you now.
Oh, okay.
Somehow. Yep, I can hear you. So go ahead.
Okay, all right. What would happen if you don't have transit options, but after COVID you are required to come on site?
You need to address that with the hiring manager or your HR manager that if you don't have transit option, they're expected to be there, but you don't have transit options, you need to work something out. Let them know right away because they need to work with you, especially in this context. I think generally companies are being more understanding. So make sure you work that out with them and have a conversation of what options do they have. Can they reimburse you for transportation? Can they give you a long-term rental? Things like that they could potentially do. So, but bring it up. Whatever there's things like this, you definitely bring it up.
Yeah, that was everything then.
Okay. All right. So things you should consider again: the company size, the industry they're in, the values of the company is what the company stands for. Something that is important to you. The social impact, the impact of what the company does. The culture. Is it a hierarchical culture? Is it an inclusive culture? Is it a consensus culture? The leadership. Is it important to you? Who is the CEO and who's out in the news about this company and your association with them? Is that important to you? Things like diversity, not just the diversity of the company, but their commitment and their passion for diversity, what they're doing to increase the diversity of the workforce. The reputation as an organization, as a company. Is that important to you? The financials. Growth opportunities. Is that something that's important to you? Travel, as obviously right now, there's not much of that, but is travel important to you or not important to you? The people, are the people that you'll be working with. Is that important to you? Work-life balance, perks. Again, location is not quite a factor right now, but it will be again, obviously soon or when we're back to normal, that will be a factor. So these are all the things that you should consider as you look at an offer. So don't think of it as just purely the number. These are all the things that matter as you commit to an organization. So which of these are important? So let's take a moment that we won't do the breakout so we can keep going, but think about what are the 3 to 5 factors are critical to you. Rank them and think why are these three to 5 things important to you? Whatever that may be. So let me put them back and I'll give you a minute to just jot them down, think about it. And we can share if you like, but I'll put them back so you can see and choose from the list essentially which 3 to 5 are important to you. Presumably money, but not always. And what else is important to you? Is it the values? Is it the social impact? The perks? Just having free food and free laundry important to you? Companies have them, some companies don't. What is it that's really critical to you? And think about what things must you have in a job that without them, they don't, you wouldn't accept it. So take a moment to think about these. Okay, let's move on. So we're supposed to break out and do pairs, but I won't do that just so we can carry on. But anybody want to share their thoughts on what are these 3 to 5 factors that are important to you and why?
Sure, I'll share quickly if no one else will.
Yeah,
For
go
me, I
ahead.
think most important is probably the role in the project, the work I'll actually be doing. There's a lot of, I guess, boring jobs in my field and a lot that really interests me. So that's most important. Then after that, it'd probably be leadership and values of the company to make sure that somewhere that I can truly grow in. And then maybe location or salary after that.
Okay, cool. Thank you. So that's great. Those are great things to keep in mind. And so there's no right or wrong answer. It's whatever it's important to you, right? So if money is important to you, that's great. If the role, to Nicholas's point, is important to you, that's great. But be mindful of what that is and be honest with yourself that these are the things that matter to you. And should you accept an offer that doesn't speak to those things that are important to you? So, and also keep in mind that these things will shift. So there was a time in my life where the salary was important and, making as much as I could was important. Now it's not so important. Not that I'm rich, but I don't need to, that's not a priority. The impact of what I do is a priority, and my growth opportunities is a priority, and the values of the organization that I'm in is a priority. So that's, things shift as you go, and that's okay as well. So thank you. Anyone else?
I would probably say
Sure.
social impact would be number one,
Okay.
because like I want to feel like the work I'm doing like is actually benefiting other people.
Right.
And then leadership would probably come afterwards, because like if you have a leader who's not really like, motivated to the mission or whatnot,
That's right.
like you yourself don't really feel motivated. Like if you talk to other people about your job, you'll be like, it's a job.
Right.
And then lastly, I'd probably say the salary.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Delighted to see that money is not the motivator necessarily. And if it is, that's quite all right. So awesome. Thank you both. Okay, let us move on. So, this is a simple tool that you can use to evaluate your offers, right? So write down what are your five ranked priorities on the left, A, B, C, D, E. And on the right, ideally, of course, you get these offers at the same time. And this is where it gets tricky. But let's say that you can lay out your 1, 2, 3 offers, and what of the 3 of your 5 priorities, what do they hit? As you can see, there's a variety of offers here that some have more, hit more priorities than others. For 3 has the highest priorities, but only 2. For 1 has 3 in the middle. For 2 has also 3, but the bottom one. So here's where you have a conversation with yourself of what's important, right? Which makes the most sense for you. And are these priorities truly reflective of of what matters to you? Or maybe you can shift them around. But this way, the simple matrix allows you to be deliberate in what you consider. Okay, here's some useful tips for negotiating do's and don'ts. All right, so do's. As much as possible, do this by phone or by Zoom, or in person ideally, but obviously we're not doing that right now. But the point is, don't do it by text. You do not negotiate by job offers by text or by email or any indirect tools. Do it by phone or by Zoom. The more you can engage with the recruiter directly and in person, the better. It's easy to decline requests and negotiate by email. It's easy to say no, whereas by Zoom you can actually have a conversation or by phone. Be positive, enthusiastic. You're delighted to have this opportunity. You love what this role is about. Be grateful. So you're grateful to have this opportunity. You're grateful for the potential of joining this amazing company. Whatever. Be factual. So when the things you bring into the conversation, be factual. Do your research to get the facts in your conversation. Don't just go by, my friend told me or I heard over here. Be specific on where and what facts are you bringing in. This one's really important. Prioritize and address all your needs together. So if you're going to have a conversation to negotiate elements of the job offer, discuss them all together. So if the salary is something you want to talk about and the start date, don't have one conversation for the salary, resolve that, and then have another conversation a week later for the start date. Recruiters don't like that. They want to have one conversation to address all your needs. And once you resolve one, move on to the other and address the more important ones first and then the other. So if salary is the most important thing for you, address that and then start date or wherever else. But do them all together. Know your breaking point. So if you know that you can't accept less than X and you've done your research and you think this is something that you just can't live with, know that that's the point. If to the earlier point, if location is something important to you, you cannot work in the Midwest. That is just not your thing. And the only position available is in the Midwest. Well, then that's a breaking point. So know what that is, and be ready to walk away if you can negotiate that. Be mindful of the other party too, because remember, they're also trying to make sure that you're happy and that they get what they need. So don't think this is only a one way where you have to get, but also you have to give as well. So be mindful of what they're going through and the limitations they have, and think of the big picture, right? This is not. Don't think of it as just this job for this offer, for this salary at this time, but think of the big picture. This is the first chapter in your career. If it's a full-time position, this is a stepping stone to something bigger. If it's an internship, so think of the bigger picture, not just literally this job for today. And any questions, please let me know. Some of the don'ts: do not include personal factors. So if you decided to buy a Ferrari and now you have these giant payments for a Ferrari and you need a higher salary, well, that's not a valid reason for asking for a salary. If you brought home 5 dogs from the shelter, which is a noble idea, but now you have all this food to buy for your 5 dogs, that's not a factor to ask for a higher salary. Whereas if you've learned Java and C++ and MATLAB, that wasn't included in your resume before, or something, a new certification you received, and therefore you bring more skills, and therefore you think your salary should be higher, that's okay. Don't be combative. So this is remember, they want you, so they already like you. So don't make them dislike you. So have a friendly, factual conversation, not combative. By the same token, don't just blindly accept numbers. So if you have a conversation and they throw a number at you that you don't quite understand, don't just accept it. Say thank you. Let me take it back and digest it, think about it, and go do your research and see where it lands. So don't just accept it. This is also important. This is something that turns off recruiters immediately. Do not negotiate just to negotiate. So if you're happy with the offer and you think it hits all the things you want, don't just negotiate to get more of anything. People can tell when you're negotiating just for the sake of it, and that does not look good. And this last point is also something I want to really stress: is do not give away intelligence unless it benefits you. So I know this is a fraught metaphor, but it's kind of like dating. This is between you and that one company. It's not between you and everybody else you're talking to. So a company you do not have to disclose to another company who else is giving you an offer, what the offer is for, unless you want to share and unless it benefits you. So if you know that this company you're talking to would be motivated by knowing that their competitor is giving you an offer, then it's okay. But otherwise, you don't have to disclose. And I know that companies ask you to disclose in their forums and their conversations, but feel completely comfortable saying, that's between me and them. Let's just focus on this conversation. Let's focus on this offer. They don't need to worry about what, who else is offering you what. So don't feel obligated to give away intelligence. That is absolutely important. There's states in the United States that are now forbidding that you disclose this information, that you disclose, for example, your current salary or your previous salary, because that shouldn't be relevant to the conversation you're having with this new company about this new job at a potentially new salary. So there's the 2 different conversations. So I want to make sure that you have that, be very comfortable and clear with that. Questions about just that point?
Well, I had one. I was talking to somebody who said she received an offer, but no, she didn't receive an offer. They said they wanted to hire her, but they asked her how much she wanted to get. Like what salary range was she hoping for?
Right.
So how do you address that when you're coming in as a new employee and you don't know even what range to?
Absolutely. So there's 2 ways you can do it, or you can do it both, in both. You can answer this in 2 ways, or you can give them both of these points. One is ask them, well, what range did you have in mind? So have them tell you what do they have in mind. So that's 1. And 2 is do the research on things like LinkedIn is actually very good for this. The LinkedIn has a section for jobs, for salary, it's, specifically. And while it's self-reported, it is fairly accurate. It is within, the ballpark. There's a link that I'll show you in a minute called Educate to Career, which also has data on salaries, and in particular for recent grads and new grads. That's also fairly accurate, and it's more based on Department of Labor data, which is also more accurate. So if you do that kind of research, you get a sense of where your salary should be, and then propose a range, not a number, but a range that, they can consider. But I like the idea of putting them on the spot and say, well, what did you have in mind? And see where they say. So, but you should have some idea of what, what the number should be. So.
Could I add on a little?
Yes. Hi, Joy.
Sorry. Hi, that was me who had that situation. And what happened was I had an internship offer come, and they asked me how much, and because I didn't really know, I just said I think like minimum wage. But when I got the actual offer, it was below minimum wage.
Ooh.
And so, and I feel like it was like that because the company was like really like a small startup company.
Okay.
And so I felt bad to ask them to raise like the salary or things like that because they don't really have that much money and stuff. So I was just wondering what you would do in that situation.
So, below minimum wage is illegal, right? That's just flat out illegal. So in that case, you can certainly ask, make them aware that, this is below minimum wage. This is not legal. So, and not having money if they don't have money to properly pay you, then they shouldn't be hiring you. So, above obviously minimum wage, it depends on the role and all of that, but they should be paying employees based on what you bring and what the market bears, for that role. Yes, the fact that they're a smaller company makes a difference versus a big company, but it should be, within a certain range. Just because they're the company with little money doesn't mean that they can just not pay you or pay you below minimum wage. That's legal. Now, if it's a startup, for example, they can't offer you stock options, right? And say, well, look, we can't pay you a full salary. We'll pay you, let's say, a partial salary and stock options so that, if the company does well, then you'll do well. But there's there's compensation to go, potential compensation that goes with it. But just purely pay you below minimum wage just because they don't have funding, that's just illegal. So
I see. I think the job option details it wasn't an hourly wage, but it was more like a stipend. And then it was when I calculated it based upon like how many hours they said I should be coming in,
right,
that I realized it was below.
Right. Now, if it's research, let's say in a lab, right? If it's research at a lab here on campus, that's a little different, right? Because there's the different stipulations for working in a nonprofit and a university, that sort of thing. But it's an actual company, right? A public private company, a for-profit company that is deriving benefit from the work you'll do. That's an internship that should pay you the market rate, or as close as possible, or some combination, right? Like I said, stock options or something like that, but not just pay you, below market or below minimum wage just because their funding isn't so great. So, does that help?
Got you. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah,
Okay.
it does.
Yes. Great conversation there. Okay, deadlines. There's another hot topic that I want to bring up. Professional courtesy. So in the recruiting world in general, professional courtesy is to give candidates 2 weeks, right? That's out in the normal, for professional courtesy, the bare minimum. Now, the Career Center and the campus has used to have a deadline of October 1st. And now they switched to a relative deadline of 3 weeks from the offer, because they feel that employers have told them that they need, basically shorter time to fill their positions, and they're under pressure to fill the positions, et cetera. So that's the Career Center. We in the college believe that you and engineers have lots of options and need ample time to consider these options, which are, as I mentioned just now, they have complex structures and lots of items to consider. And especially if it's a full-time position, this is a significant decision for you. So we ask employers to give you a deadline of November 1st. Now, both of these, the college and the campus, are guidelines, so we can't really enforce it. So we can't tell companies, thou shalt do, because they can do whatever they want. But we do ask that they please follow, that they honor this request and this guideline, independent of whether they're part of the CAP program in EECS or anything else in the college. Purely because they're recruiting engineers, we ask that when they recruit engineers, they give you a deadline of November 1st. As I said, the campus is 3 weeks from the offer. So if the offer comes in let's say late August, you only have till mid-September, which is, we don't believe enough time for you to consider, so properly consider your options, in a responsible way. Where is it on the website, you wonder? It's here. There's a link, and there's the wording of, why we asked for this and what we asked for. So if employers have any questions, you can send them to that website. If they insist that they can't or they won't, feel free to send them my way. I'll try to convince them as much as possible. But again, both our deadline or guideline and the campus are guidelines, so we can't really enforce it in the end. It's really a matter of convincing them and highlighting to the employers that it's important to give you the ample time you need to consider your options. So questions about this? I know this is a hot topic right now, and companies keep pushing and pushing for tighter and tighter deadlines that keep you from really considering all your options. So questions, concerns, rumors you heard about this?
Yeah, I've heard actually of one student who they gave him an offer and they told him that he needs to decide within like 2 days or else
Right.
they will not give it to him.
Right.
And then I think he did mention this website,
Okay.
but they still didn't like extend it. And I was wondering like what you do in that situation.
So, and in that case, if they give you less than 2 weeks, independent of any of these deadlines, just remind them that professional courtesy in the recruiting world is that you give candidates 2 weeks, period. It's independent of anything. So at the least, they should honor that. And that preferably they honor, at least, if not the campus, certainly our deadline, our guideline for the November 1st deadline, because you all need to be deliberate in considering all your options. So that, they should at least honor the 2 week professional courtesy practice. But I know that, and I've heard from other students too, that companies are just pushing that, they want to know in 2 days and they want to know in 2 days. This is where it gets into the territory of, if you feel that pressured, accept it. And if you're still in the recruiting process and something else comes along and you end up having to renege, sometimes you're pushed into doing things that you may not want to do or typically you wouldn't do, is the way I see it. So I think companies are sometimes pushing too hard on you, and this is what happens. So I'm happy to have a chat with them if it comes to happen. I know I've offered to some companies and they just ignore it, and the offer is the offer, and that's that. So there's not a whole lot we can do, sadly. So except that remind them of the professional courtesy that should happen in the recruiting world and the need for giving you ample time to consider your deadlines. So does that help, Joy? Or anybody else?
It does. I think it's actually kind of funny.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I think it's unfortunate that and I think the other thing to be mindful of that, yes, in these times, it's a bit of an employer's market. Jobs have been cut and canceled and such. But professional courtesy is still professional courtesy. They should give you the time to consider offers. To be mindful of that you need to be deliberate in what you choose. And also, I'm not a big fan of pressuring students into these kinds of deadlines, because if you need to pressure somebody into accepting your offer, what's wrong with your offer? The offer and the culture of the company should be so compelling that you wouldn't consider anybody else. And if they need that kind of pressure to go there for you to accept it, I wonder what the culture is about. So yeah, I'd be leery of that. So I think there may be a question.
No, that was just Joy writing in, so we're good.
Okay, cool. All right, so there you go. So that's the point about deadlines. I know it's not an ideal situation, so, but that's where we're at. Okay, so negotiating an extension. This is where we'll talk a little bit about this a little more. So if you need an extension, we just talked about this, explain why. And really the reason should be that you want to be deliberate and considering all your options. It's a momentous occasion or decision for you, whether it's for full-time, whether it's for an internship. So, explain that. Be reasonable. So don't ask for, 3 more months, because it's likely not going to happen, but 2-3 more weeks. Share, but as appropriate. So, if you have another offer, or you're waiting for another offer and you want to get more, more time to consider that offer, if you think it'll, if it's from a company or that this company would hate to lose you to this other offer, that they'll more willing to give you that leeway. So share as you think is appropriate. Always express gratitude. You're delighted. You're grateful for this opportunity. Be enthusiastic. And over the phone or Zoom. If you send it by email, it's easy to say no because it's completely impersonal. And I've seen that before where we get an email asking for X time and we just say, no, sorry. And there you go. It's easy to say no. So what does it sound like? Something like what you see on the screen. I'm delighted to receive an offer from you, whoever. It's a great fit for my passion and skills, but as you know, this is an important decision. I want to be thorough and deliberate. Can I get back to you by X? So whatever X date may be, so 2 weeks out. Give them a specific date. So don't just say, can I have 2 more weeks? Just say, can I get back to you by, do the math and add 2 weeks to whatever they offer you. So, and see what they say. They may say no, they may say yes. But as I always say, ask you may get, don't ask you won't get. So this one's fairly straightforward. In the case, and Joy, as you mentioned, the case where they give you this really, really short deadline, remind them that in addition to you needing time to consider your options, that professional courtesy says that you should have at least 2 weeks to consider an offer. That you should have that courtesy afforded to you as well. That you're college students, but you're professionals as well, and that applies to any candidate. Okay, this is where it gets interesting. Negotiating a salary. So again, explain why, be reasonable, share as appropriate, express gratitude, be enthusiastic, and over the phone. So what does that mean? So, and also be factual. So the be reasonable part. So do your homework as to what is the reasonable salary for your position, right? Whether it's an internship, and internships are very, I should point out that intern salaries are very tight. So there's tables that are, created for intern positions, and they're very tight and they're very prescribed. So it's less likely they'll give you much leeway there. But full-time positions are a little different, right? Because they're full-time, you're basically a professional now. So there's more leeway there. So do your research, find out from, as I said, salary.com has good data, LinkedIn has good data. I'll show you at the end, this Educate to Career website has good data. So get a sense of what the sum total of all this research points you to, a certain number. And also be mindful that, or make sure that they've included things like your GPA, whether you have internship experience, whether you have other offers in mind. And again, this is depending on whether you want to share or not, but things like GPA, internship experience, leadership experience. The fact that you're at Berkeley, companies very often have a higher rate for elite schools like Berkeley, Stanford, Carnegie Mellon, et cetera, that are, the top tier schools in certain fields. So do they account for that? And say something like this: I'm excited to receive an offer again from your company. It's a great fit. I do feel the salary is lower than I expected based on my research. You don't have to give it all away right now, but just based on my research and my background, would you consider a range of, high to low? Now, notice that I mentioned a range from high to low. You want to mention the higher end of the range because you want them to remember that number first. So that you want that number to stick in their heads first before the low. So, you always hear the first number you hear is what you remember most. Also be mindful that the low of that range, you should be comfortable accepting. So if you say, well, a range of, 90 to 80, you're saying that 80 is okay, but it's at the low end. So don't say a low end that you wouldn't accept. So be mindful that low is something you would accept, because they could come back saying, we can offer you the low end. And if that's all they got, or they can offer, are you okay? So I see a question maybe?
Yes. So at this point during the negotiation, can you disclose the names of other companies that have given you an offer? Or would it be better to say something like, I have received another offer at a different company with a higher pay?
Again, it depends. If the company that they have an offer from could be a trigger for this company to do so, to act, it's okay. So, if it's a smaller company and you have an offer from Apple, now Apple of course has big bucks, so that's a little different. But let's say that it's an offer from Apple, and this company would love to snatch you from Apple, you might consider that, you might offer that. If it's the reverse, you have an offer from Apple and you're going to negotiate with or you're negotiating with Apple, they won't care if you have an offer from, some small company. They know they're Apple, they do what they do. So it's relative. It's not always a given that that mentioning others will trigger, will help you in your case. So I recommend that you keep it to between you and the conversation between you and this company, and the role that that you're going to do, what the role pays, what the research says. Not so much bringing in other offers, because that just complicates the matter. So, but feel it out. See what think of the relativity of the companies that you're talking to. So are the competitors? Would the company you have an offer from, or are you negotiating an offer with, hate to lose you to their competitor, that sort of thing. So kind of gauge it from that perspective, but it's not always a given that you have to disclose. And at this stage, I would keep it to, for what I'm coming to do, based on what I bring, this is what I think is appropriate, and go from there. So does that help?
Yeah, looks like
okay. Anyway, so that's how this works. So questions or other questions about the whole salary conversation? And again, don't bring personal matters into this. So, as I said, if you just bought a brand new condo on the beach, upon graduation, and now you got to make all these payments. That's not the company's concern. They're not paying you to afford your condo on the beach. They're paying you to do this job and to come and do this work as a college graduate, etc. If you're, above in over your head, that's not for them to solve. So be mindful of that, because we hear that all the time, or I used to hear all the time of, I've done all kinds of crazy things and I need a higher salary. Well, that's not what we're paying for. So be very careful with that. Okay, so what do we have? I was gonna have you practice. So anyone interested in practicing? Maybe we'll just leave it to questions. So, so here's a scenario. You have an offer from your, B-list company due in 7 days, and your A-list company, the one you really want, is moving along, but there's no offer yet. So you want to have a conversation with the A-list. You need an extension to see the A-list through until the A-list 3 comes through. So you want to talk to company B and try to, extend that, hopefully that to the time that you can get both offers, active, and then you can consider well. So, so we can have we would have had a partner A and B, and we'll practice next time. And then the other scenario that I had is a little more complicated. So you have an offer from your A-list company, but a higher competing offer from your B-list company, so one that you're not so in love with. In addition, your A-list offer is too early. So they want you to start in, at the end of May, right after you finish. So you want to talk to the A company and get a higher salary and push back the date. So, is another example that you could bring. Now, depending on, now A-list does not mean that it's a great company, or A-list, that means that it's your favorite company, whatever company that may be. So it's your dream company, and B-list is your B-list company. So I'm not implying that A-list is, glamour company and B is not. It's relative to you, what you think is your A-list and your B-list. So, and that could be anything. So, so again, in this case, you would make sure you have a conversation with a company and discuss either the higher salary that's important to you, or the start date that's important to you first, and then the other topic, but discuss it all together. Don't have one conversation one day and then arrange for another one for the start date the next day, and another one for something else the next day. Also, if you agree on a number and you accept it, don't have yet another conversation for a third number. Once you arrive at, you have a conversation and you arrive at you make an agreement, don't go back to yet another conversation. That companies do not like continuing the conversation on money, or for that matter, anything else. Once you arrive at an offer, that's it.
Do you want me to read it? Or you're reading through the?
No, I see that. I see the little numbers, so go for it.
Okay. So lots of students plan to get experience in industry for a year before deciding on going to grad school.
Right.
Is this something that they should mention in the recruiting process?
Ooh.
And are education benefits and opportunities something they should talk about in the negotiation process?
Okay, so let's take that two separate questions. So if you're looking to go to grad school, if you're definitely going to grad school and independent of work, so if your intention is to just quit and go to grad school and that's it, and you're looking at quitting within a year or two for sure, even more so if you've been accepted to grad school and you'll be quitting in a year or two to go to grad school. That's a tricky one, because if you mention that they know you're going to leave in a certain time and your intention is to leave, they may not want you. They might rescind the offer or may not do the offer anymore. However, if you say, I don't intend to leave, I want to go to grad school and take advantage of your the education benefit, then I think you can bring it up. If your intention is to continue with the organization, but you want to take advantage of the educational benefit to either do grad school part-time or come back and commit to come back later, that's okay. But if you're definitely just going to work for a while or a year or two, and I know this happens from time to time, and then quit, that's tricky. And I'd say it's best to disclose. Honesty is always best. So companies do not like it when you show up, you don't say anything, and a year later you quit to go to grad school, and they had all these plans to bring you on board and train you and grow you, and then suddenly you leave and you knew this. They don't like that. So I think it's best to just be honest and have a conversation about your long-term plans and how that fits in with the organization, whether you can do it under their benefits or you can do it separately.
And then to go on with the, is this something that you should negotiate in the beginning with, I guess it would be something like, what does the company have to offer? And if they do offer educational benefits, that could be some leverage for you.
Right. It's not something you'll negotiate, right? Because the way the program is structured is the way it's structured, right? So they're not going to give you more money for school or anything like that. It's really more the awareness, knowing that your interest is to go back to grad school, and what benefits do they have for continuing your education, right? Both financially, so that do they pay for part of it, some of it, all of it, and also flexibility. Is it possible that you could, let's say, drop to halftime while you're in school, or take 2 days off a week to go grad school or whatever. But I think you should bring it up if it's something you're seriously looking at doing. Bring it up, because I think the honesty is best. They do not want surprises later that especially if you've been accepted to grad school and you accept the job and then a year you leave. They do not want to hear that surprise. So that would not look good.
Okay, then we have another one. What if during negotiation you ask for an extension because there is another company who's going to give you an offer, and they give it to you, but later a company you weren't expecting an offer starts moving along the process? Is it okay to ask for another extension? Or what happens if you get an extension, but then the other company doesn't want to give you an offer by then? So juggling too many offers.
Yes, this is the challenge of all this. You could ask for a second extension. I've seen it happen, but it's unlikely companies will give it to you. So when you ask for an extension, try to get as long as an extension as you can from the outset, to potentially cover for things like this, for sort of a dark horse coming out of nowhere with another offer, just in time for the first offer to expire, or even after the expiration, because companies won't like you. Essentially, like I said earlier, bringing out the same topic, the same an extension yet again. So it's best to get as much an extension as you can up front. And if you do get an offer out of nowhere for obviously if you get an offer from another company, it's because you've been in the running with them. So if you have an offer from somebody, anyone else that you're speaking to, let them know, because if they could give you an offer, if you think they might give you an offer, they should know, and you should prod them to give you, so you can have as many of your offers as possible all at the same time. So, which I know is not always possible. Companies have different timelines, but if you're in the running, and you know that things are moving along, and you have this offer, tell everybody else that you're working with that you have this offer, and could they speed it up, or let you'd love to, again, be mindful of all your options together, and could they speed up the process, or could they let you know as soon as possible?
Okay, then we have another one where the student is in a situation where they plan to attend grad school right after completing their undergrad, but they don't want to put all of their eggs in one basket. So they're applying to full-time positions as well as summer internships. And then how do you suggest that they navigate that issue?
Ooh, I mean, it's, sometimes you don't want to be trying to cover your bases too much. So you got to pick one and go with it. But I could see the challenge that if you're intending to go to grad school and you haven't applied, you're applying, but you don't know yet, and yet essentially the grad school responses don't come after you might have to accept an offer. That's a tricky one. All I can say is that it's a tricky one. I think it's best that, again, honesty is best. So what you might consider is apply for internships. Apply for a full-time position. Sorry. You might, and I've seen this happen where you apply for a full-time position, right? Assuming, let's say that grad school doesn't work out. And let's say if it does work out, you end up being accepted to grad school. And so now you only have the summer instead of the whole rest of the year. And you might let the company know that you've decided to go to grad school. Could they convert that full-time position they just offered you into an internship for that summer between undergrad and grad, and hopefully come back full-time when you finish grad school? Especially if it's a fifth-year program, the MH program, where it's only 1 year. I've seen that happen where companies, students do find out about grad school, especially the 1 year program, and they convert their full-time position to internships for the summer between grad and undergrad, and then they bring them back full-time after grad school. That does happen, but again, be honest. I think is the best thing is just be open, unless you're definitively going to grad school. If you know they're going to go somewhere and it'll happen no matter what, then just apply for internships. But if it's possible, likely, maybe, try the grad route, the full-time route, and then try to convert to internship if grad school does come through. And keep it simple. Instead of applying for internships and full-time, which is a different mindset, different approach, go down one route, and if it works out, then convert it to internship if possible. And it does happen. I've seen it.
That's all I have for now.
Okay, cool. Okay, accepting and declining. So accepting, of course, is fun. That's the whole point of this, especially when you have lots of offers and you pick the one you want. Sign and return by the deadline. Keep a copy for yourself. And this is to the point of professional courtesy that you expect from companies towards you. Then you should also, reciprocate and let others know that you're withdrawing from consideration. So if you're accepting an offer and you're done, this is what you wanted, then let other companies you might have been talking to that you're done, that you're withdrawing from consideration, and so that they can move on to other candidates. Don't linger on potentially impacting other candidates while you're already accepted. And then declines, again, express gratitude, keep it short and sweet. You don't need to share details that you've accepted an offer with so-and-so for this money or anything, just simply that you're decided to decline. It's not for you at this time, and you look forward to staying in touch. And this is one where email is okay. So don't call the recruiter to tell them, email them that you've decided to decline. At this time, it's not for you, etc. And look forward to staying in touch. Can we connect on LinkedIn? That's completely reasonable. And, and there you go. So this is one where you definitely don't have to disclose. Now, other companies might want you to disclose. They might tell us where'd you go and what they offer you. That's basically none of the business. They want to know, but you don't have to disclose. This is purely between you and the company accepted, not the company didn't accept. So questions about that? And again, do not renege as much as possible. Once you've accepted, be comfortable that this is the one you've accepted. And again, with the caveat that I can understand when high pressure taxes come in and push you into reneging. So I'll just put it that way, but preferably don't renege. When we've had situations where, a number of students have reneged on certain companies, on one company, and they've had conversations with us saying, look, this keeps happening, we won't come back here. They didn't actually follow through, so it's all right. But they could, if it happens a lot, because and particularly if you renege further down the road. So if you accept a job in September and come January, February, you renege then, that they really don't like, because by the time, February comes around, every other candidate they could have had is probably gone. And so now they're scrambling for candidate. They spent a lot of money on you, bringing you on board, and all the preparation that happens before you start a job. And now you tell them, oh, sorry, I'm not coming. And they wasted all that time and money on you and missed out another candidate. So that is definitely not good. So if you're going to do it, and preferably not, it's as soon as you accept it, before anything else happens behind the scenes. But preferably don't do it at all. So some final thoughts. Keep in mind the big picture. So don't think about just the salary or just any one factor. Think about the big picture. This is a career choice you're making. It is also not forever. So you're accepting this job with this one company is not where you'll be forever. There's no such thing anymore. Again, it's the job that matters, what you'll be doing for the short, medium, long term, not less so the details of this offer. Be confident. Remember, you're a Berkeley engineer. They want you. There's a reason why they're after you. So be confident in getting the things that you want. Reach out for support. For all of us here in ESS, the Career Center, we're here to support you and answer your questions. And I know it sounds weird, but have fun with it. Enjoy the process. It's unnerving. It's weird, but if you have fun with it, it'll feel better. Some resources I mentioned. There's lots of great resources here. The Career Center has, through Handshake, has some resources on job offer negotiation. FastWeb, the Harvard Business Review has how to evaluate, accept, reject, and negotiate a job offer. Forbes, lots of places out there we can find good information on job offer negotiation that kind of address the same things that I just mentioned. So, so you take a picture of that slide; it'll be recorded. So, don't go through this alone. Is the main point. Do not do this on your own. And again, salaries, which is one of the key pieces. Again, salary.com is useful. LinkedIn has a salary section. Glassdoor also has information on salaries, but keep in mind that Glassdoor is sort of the Yelp of recruiting. So, it's people that either love a place or love their offer and, want to really share. And, it's kind of on the high end, or they're so upset or so, disappointed that they go and share at the other end. And so it's kind of the bookends you get, the two extremes. So be careful that in the middle, there's not a whole lot. So, take it with a grain of salt. And I mentioned earlier this Educate to Career. And this is a great website that really does use data from the Department of Labor. So this is not self-reported, it's actual, my understanding is that it's actual data that walks you through the role that you're coming into, the degree you have, from where, et cetera, all the factors that are important. And then it gives you a range of a salary, and also based on the location. So this one's really useful. And from what I've seen, it's pretty accurate. The numbers are generally in the ballpark. So I would really encourage you to check this one out and use this, all these pieces as data points. So don't think that there's any one place that has the number, because the only people that have the number is HR, and they don't share that. So
I'm trying to post it. I can't copy and paste off of your screen to put the link in.
Right. Okay. All right. So was this workshop successful? Do you feel more knowledgeable about evaluating job offers, and do you feel more confident about negotiating job offers? So let's open up the poll and let us know, and be honest, please. All right. Okay. 100%. So thank you.
Well done.
I like that. There you go. So everybody felt comfortable. So thank you. I'm glad you did. All right. So what else do I have? Questions? I guess we'll just stop sharing here. Any questions, remaining questions about anything? All right. Then with that, thank you so much for your attention. Please let your friends know that this will be recorded and available. So, and most importantly, oh, I forgot to put my, let me share my screen again. My link, my email, of course, it's MJ Lopez. And if you want to hang with me and have a meeting, you go to bit.ly, hang with Marvin, and make an appointment, a 30-minute appointment, Mondays, Wednesdays, or Thursdays to ask questions about this or anything else for that matter. So thank you. Thank you, Tracy, for the awesome moderating.
You're the one who did it.
Thank you all for coming.